Okay, so we're going to do one more example with Google Tests. But this time we're going to do it with our ourvector implementation and look at how writing some code tests for a more complex class might look like. So I'm going to do this in Memer. Again, I will link all the code that we write into the slide so that you can refer back to it. One of the things I hope to do here is write out some more, think about some more complicated things to test other than just like the basic testing the default constructor and putting stuff in, and that all you need to do too. So right now I have the size test set up. I'm going to do one basic test to get started just to make sure that it's like working correctly with the class. So I'm going to make an ourvector of integers, and then I will test that size. So remember that the ourvector initializes the capacity to 4 and the size to 0. So I can't remember if the function is called size. Let's check. So I think it's called size, right? Oh my gosh. So Control F is size. Okay, yeah. So that should work. So let's try that. Okay, so I need to include the ourvector library. I already put it in this folder, so that should be good. You can see it's right here. I'm in that folder. Let's try again. Okay, now let's see if that test passes. Okay, so that's good. All right, let's test something a little bit more complex. So the thing I think we should test is some of those more complicated copy constructor and things like that. So let me make another test, and let's just do the copy constructor. Let's test that. So I'm going to create a vector, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put stuff in it. So I'm just going to do something small for now, so I'm just going to put like 3 things in it. And then I'm going to make a copy of it. And I can even do the equals operator too, and make sure those are working as I would expect. So I'm going to do 3, 5, and 7 as my, those are totally different numbers than I just said out loud, but it doesn't matter. So while we're at it, let's check that the size is right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the copy constructor. The way the copy constructor works is you declare another vector, same type, and you set that new vector, which you're going to call something different, with the old vector. And when you do that, the vector should be an exact copy. Didn't copy. It should be a copy of vec. So vec2 should be a copy of vec1. So we could start by just checking the size and see if it's the right size. Okay, so that looks good. Now let's go ahead and check that all the values are the same. So if I loop through the first vector, so I'm going to do that by calling vec.size. So remember, we're testing size by doing this, right? If size doesn't work, this doesn't work. So we want to make sure that when we're using functions in other tests that we've already tested those functions. Sometimes it's not entirely possible to test them separately, but in this case it is. And then we're going to do an assert. Now we have a lot of choices here, right? Because we had a couple different ways to access elements. So we could use the square bracket operator and access the element that way, or there's also an at function. Now the thing is that we're trying to test the copy constructor, but we're using the square bracket operator, right? So before we did this, we would have wanted to make sure that we've already tested the square bracket operator to make sure it works. But if our copy constructor worked properly, then this would be the same thing, right? So this is testing that what we just made a copy of would work. I believe this is the same syntax. This has no different behavior for the copy constructor. If any of you were curious, just by the way that the copy constructor is written in the and this is probably a little bit clearer. This actually shows that it's a constructor rather than an equals operator. But let's try to do an equals operator now. So this is the copy constructor. We're seeing that we have the same values. We would need to do a lot more testing than just this, but it looks like it's functioning right now. Let's try the equals operator though, because it's very similar. So the only difference between the equals operator and the copy constructor is that here, what you're going to do is you're going to declare your ourvector with the default constructor, and then you're going to use the equals operator to reassign its value to something else. You can construct it anyway. You can construct it with any other constructor, and the equals operator should override whatever it was originally constructed as with the new one. But we should see the same behavior. This should have the same result. It should pass all these test cases as well. Okay, so that's good. Our equals operator is also working. All of them are passing. So those are the tricky ones, and you're going to want to really push this. So you're going to want to, try reassigning it a couple times and making sure that it keeps changing. You're going to want to try to put lots of things in it. Let's go ahead and try that for now. So this is just 3 elements, right? So instead of doing that, let's create a big loop that puts a bunch of stuff in there. We could call a random number generator. That would be really nice to fill this vector, and that should work. Let's do that. I think that's a good idea. So let's put 1,000 things in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over here and I'm going to copy the myRandom from that previous test case we just did on random bag. Not sure if any of you got through that. At least you watched the beginning, I hope. Copy that in here. Oh my gosh, I did that last time too. I want to do copy, not CD. I cannot stand how that chat thing is right there. I mean, I know you agree. Okay. Alright, so we got that there. Let's include it, and that way we can use our random integer function. It's just a little bit nicer than just calling rand or srand to generate the numbers, because then you always have to do all that work to get it to be an integer or in a range that you want. So we'll call myRandom. Then what we're going to do is, instead of doing pushback I here, let's push back random integer 0 to 1,000. I'm just going to randomly pick numbers from 0 to 1,000. These don't need to be the same number though, so let's just do 5,000. Okay, so that will fill it with random numbers, and it's 1,000 numbers. So now this should be 1,000. I'm starting to make copies of the same thing, so I'm going to make a variable for that, right? Because we don't want to keep typing 1,000 as a magic number. Okay, so our equals operator now should be testing against that. Vector size, that all looks good. So now we're pushing it a little bit, doing something a little bit more interesting. And it looks like it's passing, and I just replaced my old test that used to have these 3, which you probably want to just do like a basic one and an advanced one. So that's pretty nice to use the random number generator in order to generate, interesting things to test that aren't just increments or whatever, because those can not expose some of the problems, right? So you want to test lots of different things. Another thing that we might want to test for our vector, this will be the case for you as you do the next thing, is let's try to test the copy constructor on a different type. So let's do it on a string. So here, instead of putting numbers, we're going to do strings. I'm doing things that I can see right now. Can't see myself, but you know what I mean. I have a can of LaCroix, so I'm going to put that. Alright, so the size should be 3. It's 3, but it should be able to copy and it should work the same. So it didn't work. It didn't even compile. So what did I do wrong? Okay. Wow. That was unnecessary. Okay, so this I didn't convert to that was a lot of errors for just one mistake. I didn't, the thing I was using the copy constructor on, wasn't declared right. It's a little dramatic though. Okay, so that looks good on that type. You need to test doubles. You need to test characters. I mean, you probably don't need to test floats, but you know what I mean? You gotta test everything. So that's a little bit about the copy constructor. Let me just spin through this real quick. So pushback, I think, that's pretty understandable how you're going to test that. You're going to add something, check it again. Front, we should probably test front. Back. Begin and end. Let me just check all the constructors, things that you're doing in other projects. So the copy constructor, the equals operator, the move constructor, yeah, that's a tricky one. The destructor, okay, let's test that. So if we open up our make file, we can see that we have Valgrind set up. So if we do make Valgrind, we can make sure that our wasn't even that close. We can make sure that we get a clean Valgrind report too. So we got 0 arrows from 0 contacts. We have 0 leaks. Oh, I think that's actually running on, that's not running on our tests. So that actually might not be a clean Valgrind report. Oh yeah, it is. It's running on the same program executable. Yeah, so that's good. And if you want to see a bad Valgrind report, let's go into our vector and let's get rid of our constructor. And then we can see, I made the text bigger, it's kind of hard to read this. Let's just not have this here. Let's not delete. Now what happens if we run this without that? We're going to have to rebuild, and then we're going to run Valgrind. So here it's a leak summary because we didn't delete any of our memory, and so here it's telling us everything we lost and a lot of other things that aren't very helpful. It's also reporting errors as well, and that is probably related to calling the copy constructor and the equals operator on things that didn't get destructed properly. And so that is a lot different. So by putting back in our destructor, make build, make Valgrind, that gives us this nice clean Valgrind report with no errors. I mean, it's also running our test, so you're kind of seeing it in between, and you're also seeing the ourvector stats. So it's kind of a lot printing. But if you go from here down, you have no leaks, no errors. All right, so that is it. That is it for the second test case. I mean, there's so many other things we can test with ourvector, but I wanted to show you some of the ones that are maybe less obvious, which is calling the copy constructor and the equals operator and using the random numbers to generate data to test against. All right, that's it.